It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by SubashTechnosis.com. If you need any kind of website design, search engine optimization, content writing, data entry, you go to SubashTechnosis.com and check out the services they offer you over there. But also, too, at Facebook, you could find them at Subash Technosis LLC. You go over there, give a little like to the page, send a little comment. But if you call them up and you need any kind of service from Subash, I've known this guy for 10 years. Make sure you mention my name so you get yourself a good deal. All right, we got today a gentleman by the name of Michael Best. Okay, on Facebook, you can find his Facebook page for Glomar Disclosure. That's Glomar. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Glomar Disclosure. And one of his websites is GlomarDisclosure.com, and another one is thatonearchive.org. And this is an incredible amount of information. Freedom of Information Act requests and documents, formally sealed documents that he has putting up here in rapid pace, and it's all good stuff. Watergate, Octopus, Promise, Iran-Contra, all the kind of stuff we love here. So we got what to say today. Michael Best. Michael, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, great. Little do people know, we've been talking for about a half hour before the show. Okay, but you're there. Tell us about yourself. Who is Michael Best?
It's one of my least favorite questions.
Yeah,
I never really know how to answer it. I guess the short, quick answer is I'm a counterintelligence analyst and journalist, and I publish lots and lots of government documents. At this point, it's a couple million documents, and pretty much the only non-governmental organization that I know of that's published more than me in that time period is WikiLeaks.
Right. Now, how did you get into this kind of work?
Slowly and obsessively. At first, I was just kind of doing a lot of reading and collecting documents. I'd always been interested in things like the Kennedy assassination, Watergate, Iran-Contra growing up, and all the weird fringe stuff that just begged questions, including UFOs and whatnot. Just because I was curious, and those were the only areas of history that we kind of knew, like there is something here. It's not just a complete myth, but we're not in agreement about what happened. So, I spent a lot of time reading about stuff, and I originally was going to be a computer programmer and administrator. When I was 16, I started university at Lake Turner University, a computer science engineering program. And eventually I left the university when a relationship with a certain young woman ended. I moved back east. And at first I continued the studies, but I got pretty sick. And I wound up spending my 19th birthday in the hospital. I was put into the ICU because I have ulcerative pancreatitis, and so I spent a couple of months just out of commission from that because I was weak. I was having trouble eating anything. They actually wanted to take out my colon. So, what had been just kind of casual reading, I was like, okay, I'm really going to dive into this stuff now because, I have time and nothing else to do. And as I read more and more, I realized a couple of things. One, there are a lot of real threats to the U.S. that a lot of people underplay or think are imaginary. And two, our counterintelligence system and our intelligence system have a lot of major flaws. They do a lot of things very well, but there's also a lot of screw ups, and at times we're just too dedicated to holding the party line, like with Yuri Nasenko. He was a fraud, but that's history turned against him and Angleton, and that's a whole other story. But the point is, I got more and more interested in that, and I wanted an inside view of how that stuff worked. A lot of people, when they investigate and report on this stuff, they're either complete outsiders, and they're journalists, which means that that's what they do. They investigate and report, and that's a good background for this, but it's still an outside viewpoint. And pretty much the only exceptions to that were people that had been in the military or the intelligence agencies. And while they often have better perspective, there's always a question of bias with them, that whether or not it's there, people will raise the question. And they're still restricted by secrecy agreements in a lot of instances. And so I wanted to get an inside view and study counterintelligence, and then use that approach to tackle this stuff, to untangle bits of apparent corruption, look at documents, figure out how to follow stuff, and to most importantly be able to understand better, like, okay, well, what is legitimate? What because there's a lot of things that for any field, for an outsider, it seems completely messed up, but when you actually understand it well enough, it's like, well, yes, I know cutting this man's chest open and doing stuff to his heart, that doesn't seem like a good idea. But trust me, I know what I'm doing, and this triple bypass is going to save his life. And I mean, that's a very crude example, but you get things like that with intelligence and counterintelligence and how things are dealt with. So I enrolled in the American Military University. I did the counterintelligence coursework, all the senior level stuff, did the undergraduate program. And after that, I started really diving into this stuff. And it's been interesting since then.
Okay, how old are you?
30.
30 years old, okay. And you said that you enrolled in a U.S. military counterintelligence school as a civilian?
American Military University, yeah. It's it caters specifically to military and intelligence personnel, but it's not restricted to them. It is a public school that has it's an online university that has a very close relationship with the Department of Defense, and you can your experience from the military or the intelligence agencies can be used in place of credits for the university, and the university degrees and programs are taught by current and former members of the military and intelligence community. I had some of my instructors were NSA, a few were DIA or CIA. A lot of them were military or had been military and had just gone to working for a company privately, still in the intelligence community, but as a contractor. Sure. And teaching on the side.
Now, have you obtained a degree from there?
Yeah, I finished the undergraduate program.
And what kind of degree do you get for that? What do you get?
Counterintelligence.
Okay. Now, has anybody tried to recruit you or employ you or anything?
I've gotten a couple of inquiries from headhunters, and most of them turn out to be annoying bullshit, where even if it's a real company, I don't want to say any names, but I've gotten a lot of inquiries where it's like, we think you would be perfect for this. We've looked at all your stuff, blah, blah, blah. Are you interested? And I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, let's talk. And they go, great, fill out this application, send it to some guy, and we're done.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, you're just full of nonsense. I did briefly work with a company that it was a startup at the time, Red Earth Intel, and that was it was basically focused on environmental crime and wildlife crime, like wildlife trafficking, figuring out that stuff. And I handled the counterintelligence stuff for them. we developed a source in Kenya who actually he wound up providing hundreds of emails and thousands of pages documenting different instances of corruption in the Kenya government and even ties to terrorism. And it was at that point that the person who had started the company and recruited me decided that it was a bit too much, which was understandable. It was becoming very large and kind of severe. And so he decided to shut the company down and focus on other aspects, and he gave the case to me. And since the case involved, and this is one of the things that blows me away and gives me, while I disagree with Snowden on some things, it gives me so much sympathy for him and people like him. The case involved a project that had been funded in large part by the World Bank. And basically the money from that had been embezzled. The stuff that they were supposed to build, they either didn't build it or it was nowhere near specifications. It didn't work. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. And a lot of that was on purpose to allow different criminals to take advantage of the system. So I reported this to the World Bank, and I got in touch with one of their vice presidents of I forget what they call it, a vice president of integrity or something like that. And basically they deal with allegations of misconduct and things like that. So I spoke to him a couple of times, and I sent the information, and they basically refused to do anything. What they wanted to do, the most that they would do, was refer the issue back to the contractors and have the people that had originally embezzled the money and were responsible for a lot of this crime, have them deal with it, and perhaps I could put them in contact with my source.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is the case where people had already wound up dead and discovered in manholes. And, so it's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not, we came up with a cryptonym for the guy, a pseudonym, Nick Bland. And, and that was all we ever referred to him as, publicly or privately. There were only two people, myself included, that knew who he actually was. And it was like, no, I'm willing to put you guys in touch with, World Bank people or something, or under the right circumstances. But no, I'm not going to give you this guy's name and you give it to the corrupt people. And so we went back and forth some more, and he wound up telling me that because I was being rude at that point by demanding to know whether or not they were going to do anything about it, that there was no point in continuing the conversation, and he hung up on me.
But just clarify for me for a second. Who was employing you to do this at this time?
This was Red Earth Intel. It's like I said, it's the company that wound up. The person running it, Fernando, closed it because things got a bit too intense and massive with this case. But I mean that experience in terms of helping understand the burden that some whistleblowers have, where it's like, okay, we've already collected the evidence. 90% of it, we know how to collect everything else. They either need to let us do the work or have someone else independent do it, and they refuse to do that. And beyond that, so many of their so-called security protocols were insane. I was trying to get them to set up, an encryption channel for the source to communicate with them so that, they could do so anonymously, but it would be encrypted. And so what they suggested, they refused to do that. What they said, we could do was I could generate the encryption keys and everything and then send it to them in an unencrypted format. And then they would use that to communicate with the guy. And it's like, well, that defeats the fucking point.
Well, no, wait, watch your language. Because remember.
I'm sorry. That defeats the point. And, so finally I got them to send a sample of their, how they encrypt stuff. And it was using Microsoft, I think it was called Office 365 or something at the time. And this wonderful system would send you an email telling you that, someone is sending you an encrypted email. You have to either log in with the Microsoft username or click this link. And then you'll see the encrypted email in an unencrypted format. And it's like, well, again, if you're sending access to the encrypted thing, if you're sending that unencrypted, it defeats the original point. And this, again, people had died, so we weren't going to take any chances. And the World Bank basically just shut down this investigation. And so I mean, he's still out there toiling away, and I'm still the problem. I have all these emails, and I mean, we set up a pretty secure system for it so that no emails were ever actually sent. We set up an anonymous, secure email address, that unconnected to our servers, the public thing. And whenever one of us wanted to communicate with the other, we would create a draft email.
Right.
And the draft would never be sent. After the other person read it, they would delete it. And, so this really minimized the chances of it ever being intercepted. And, World Bank and everyone else is just refusing to cooperate. And, the local police are corrupt. The people that are, the security system is purposefully crippled. And, we're talking about people that either are or are heavily connected to drug traffickers and terrorists. And, it's this insane situation where it's like, okay, there's no way with the system unless, someone wants to come forward and say, here's $100,000 to bankroll the investigation, get some people down there, pay for a safe place, blah, blah, blah. It's there's not going to be any fixing it from the inside because the system is hobbled from top to bottom.
Now, back to you again, your personal life. What part of the country do you live in?
I live a little bit north of Washington, D.C. in Baltimore.
Okay. Now, so this is pretty much now your full-time work now, are these websites, Glomar Disclosure and that1archive.org. This is what occupies your time all day long, correct?
Pretty much, yeah. There's still some stuff in the background that I'm working on, and but yeah, I'm making this my full-time thing for as long as I can afford to keep going.
And how are you funding this now?
With the occasional PayPal contribution from people, I sell USBs of the archives of the files that I've uploaded. The files are all free for anyone to download, but the USBs, like for instance, the FBI file collection, which is over 1,400 FBI files, and I mean many more PDFs, but 1,400 subject files. That comes to over 150 gigabytes, and that is a lot to download or put on your hard drive. And so the USBs are a way someone can pay for the USB. I get a little bit of money from it, and they get the files without maxing out their bandwidth allowance or filling up their hard drive. They get it on a little handy USB they can plug in whenever they want. And I'm also launching a Patreon campaign, which I think will be live by the time this airs.
Right. Okay. So, and but what is your PayPal?
My PayPal is the same as my regular public address, themikebest@gmail.com.
Okay.
And if you go to that one archive, you'll see at the top of the front page there's a link for the USB archives. And you can click on that, and you'll see the CIA archive, the FBI archive, UFO archive, the Kennedy King assassinations archive, and I just recently added the Essential Investigations archive, which covers everything from JFK to Iran-Contra, Watergate, the BCCI scandal, the BNL scandal, pretty much every major scandal that the U.S. has faced in the last 50 or 60 years.
Yeah, it's all the good stuff. It's all the good stuff. And it's all the characters in all these different cases. It seems that the same people keep popping up all over the place. And it seems like these are the real people in power behind the scenes that are, or at least doing all the dirty work.
To an extent, that's definitely the case. And, there's some people that they're just, even if they're not dirty, they're so involved in everything that you still need to understand them and their motivations and a lot of their work. Like Alan Dulles, for instance, setting aside all his business connections and anything else, just anyone who was DCI for as long as he was and helped set up the CIA and all that stuff, you're going to have to understand who he is. And so that's why I do things like there's a 5-part internally produced CIA history just on his tenure at CIA. It's 5 volumes. And that's on the page of different internally produced CIA histories that I've uploaded. And even though that history doesn't contain anything that says, super corrupt, he did all these horrible things, for an in-depth understanding, you really need something like that. And in terms of finding people, I got to say one of the best things that I've been able to upload is the re-indexed version of the Harold Weisberg archive. Are you familiar with him?
No, I am not.
With his work?
No, go ahead.
All right. He's one of those people that any investigator or anyone who's interested in the JFK assassination or, the Watergate and stuff, they kind of should know who he is, but most people don't. He was originally, well, not originally, but the most important early thing he did, he was an officer with the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which was one of the predecessors for CIA. It's the World War II intelligence agency. He then went on to be a Senate investigator. He helped with the HSCA investigation in some ways, and he built up a massive archive of documents and correspondence, news clippings, all relating to the Kennedy assassination, the Martin Luther King assassination, Watergate, and even a little bit with Iran-Contra and other things like the FBI raid on Scientology. And so this collection is, well, until I added it to my collection of other things, the Harold Weisberg archive was the largest publicly available non-governmental archive on the Kennedy assassination. Now, since I added that to my other stuff, obviously that title now belongs to my archive.
Gotcha.
But the re-indexed version, a version of it has been available online for a long time, but it was very basic in its organization. The new version, which was re-indexed by a friend of Harold Weisberg's, he went through it, and we're talking well over 100,000 documents, and he re-indexed and renamed all of them according to about 5,000 or 6,000 different subjects and names, each one of which has its own little sub-index and finding aid that tells you what document is what. It's a letter from who to who produced it, what the dates are, what it basically describes. And, one of the best things about it is that he collected and documented this stuff as it was happening and being investigated. And so not only do you get a lot of facts, and some of it very detailed between his notes and the unpublished manuscripts that he collected and wrote and all the government files, but you also get a very clear idea of how the investigation evolved and how different conspiracy theories came up. There was one instance, a letter he got that I think it was basically a reference to the Illuminatus trilogy, which, while being a great book, it was when that came out, and it's very enlightening to see not only the facts but how the theories evolved, and it makes it easier in some instances to see how we got derailed with different theories and ideas, like the three tramps and the JFK assassination, for instance.
One more question I wanted to ask you, again, about your personal life is, have you been interviewed before this?
Well, sure, yeah. I was actually, earlier today, I was on the phone with the Wall Street Journal. I've done a couple of podcast interviews with Doug Campbell, his stuff on the Dallas action,
okay,
and the Kennedy assassination, and there have been a couple of times, and especially for the FOIA work and the time that the FBI alleges I broke their FOIA system, and so they threw out 7,000 FOIA requests I had filed on deceased FBI officials.
How'd you break it?
Well, I didn't. I mean, their claim is nonsense, and I actually have the letter that they sent me about it. Some people, if they have kids, like they put up their tests or drawings, and now I have two things. I have one, a letter from the Central Intelligence Agency, because they ordered a couple thousand envelopes that misspelled Central Intelligence Agency.
Oh, brother. And
I have the letter from the FBI, the section chief for the Records Information Dissemination section, saying that I had used their email portal, which is not true, and I had overloaded it and submitted so many FOIA requests that it interfered with their statutory requirement to answer FOIA requests. So even though they had acknowledged all these FOIA requests I sent, they just threw them out because I had filed so many FOIA requests on FBI officials that they were like, no, it's if we were to answer these FOIA requests, it would interfere with our ability to answer FOIA requests. And I should clarify that when I say 7,000 FBI officials, each one of these is confirmed to have an FBI file according to the FBI's what's basically called the dead list. And it's an internally produced FBI list that, everyone who's known to have an FBI file and is known to be deceased, they get added to this list, and it notes the original index that they came from. I got a hold of this list. I extracted everyone who, was an FBI official, and it was a little over 7,000 names. So, and it's a very interesting case for me because they keep lying about it. They say I used their FBI portal or their email portal, and I was like, no, I didn't. I didn't break your system. You acknowledged all these requests, and they've, in addition to lying about it, they're refusing to talk to anyone. When journalists called them, they wouldn't comment. I went to the FOIA ombudsman, and they spoke to the FBI, and the FBI wouldn't tell them anything. I went to the government representative for getting information and mediating FOIA requests and disputes, and the FBI refused to talk to them about it at all.
Well, you probably broke their phone too. Hey, let me ask you a question. just recently, there was this thing hit the news, okay, about a former FBI agent that was on this dead list was stopped entering a Trump Tower with a handgun. You know anything about that? Does his name show up on your list?
No, I missed that.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
It could have actually been one of those fake news sites, But there was a story about a man being stopped on the way, and he tried to circumvent the metal detectors entering the Trump Tower. Then it started coming out on all these kind of fake websites that he was FBI and he was formerly dead. He was on a dead list. So who knows? There's so much crap out there now these days.
Yeah, and a lot of times you also run into names that they're the same,
right?
And a lot of names are fairly generic. If your first name is Michael James or Ed, there's a fair chance you're going to find someone else out there who has that same name. And I mean, Michael Best isn't even a unique name in the national security community. There's a major lawyer who Michael Best and Friedrich, I think, they come up in a lot of Google searches. And there was one instance where I was attending a conference, and there was some confusion because at the time, Michael Bloomberg's lawyer was named Michael Best. And so the people who were doing some of the screening, they knew this and they saw my name and they're like, no, you're not him. And, so it's a lot of times I think we get instances where it's just like, oh, well, someone has the same name, or like you say, all these fake websites that pop up and post, nonsense. Like I've been seeing an insane number of people faking Podesta emails, posting them online, and then attributing it to WikiLeaks. And I mean, the number of people that are doing that and posting fake news is just astonishing.
Yeah, I know, and I think part of that too is to discredit some of the stuff that's supposed to be coming out from WikiLeaks. They want to like dampen all the accuracy and the expectations and disinformation. Just a lot of confusion. Let's take a little commercial break right now. Okay, we're with Michael Best. His website is Glomar Disclosure, glomardisclosure.com, but also on Facebook, Glomar Disclosure, and then archive.org. When we get back, I want to ask you about, because I know you have some contact with the folks over at WikiLeaks, so let's get an update on what's going on with them. There's a lot of hysteria and confusion going on with that right now.
Real quick, before we jump to commercial, I just want to add, people can also follow me on Twitter. I'm NatSecGeek, NatSecGeek.
NatSecGeek on Twitter.
Nat.
Okay. Nat, N-A-T. Yeah. We'll be right back after this. And now a word from our sponsors. Did you know that 30% of all people on online dating websites and personal ads are either married or in a monogamous relationship? 30%. If you suspect that your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend may be cheating online, go to emailrevealer.com. Our online infidelity investigation. You give us their email address, and we could trace it back to online personal ads, dating sites, and social networks. We can even expand the investigation and find them cheating on escort service sites or even porn sites if they're registered to porn sites and swinger sites. So check out emailrevealer.com if you suspect your spouse is cheating, and check out our online infidelity investigation. William Ramsey is a producer here at the Opperman Report, and he's just come out with a new book, Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. Now, he just sent me a copy of this book. Oh, boy, it's about 2 inches thick, and there's a chapter on just about everybody in this book that you can imagine. The Beatles, and Jack Parsons, everybody's in here. It's incredible. And I definitely recommend this book. There's a bunch of pictures in here, too, of all these people and different chapters and information. Anselm LaVey and people I've never heard of, too. There's a whole bunch in here. JFC Fuller. I don't know who he is. But it's great stuff by our producer here, William Ramsey. So check out Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. You can find it on Amazon.com, or you could find it in the Opperman Report .com bookstore. We have an urgent bulletin. It seems that the group Strawman is still on the loose. It has been confirmed that Strawman are Canadian, okay, and that authorities are asking people to stay indoors, lock your doors and windows until this group can be dealt with. You could find more information about this group of Canadians, at strawmanmusic.com. You can have your ad played here. Okay, we're looking for sponsors. Okay, in fact, we desperately need sponsors right now to take this show to the next level. So you can have your your ad played here, read live, like I'm doing now, so artfully. Or we can even work up a little jingle for you with some music and stuff like that and play it here. You have no idea how inexpensive it would be to have your ad played on the Opperman Report on 7 stations live Friday night and another 7 stations live on Saturday night, plus replayed every day of the week on different stations, and then archived on YouTube, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and all different kinds of podcasts, Pod This and Podbean, all different kinds of places who archive the show for us. And on those archives, your ad would play indefinitely, forever. You also get a little banner on OppermanReport.com. You get a mention on the air, you get a little interview on the air, and all kinds of fun stuff if you sponsor Opperman Report. We have an opportunity to get this show on a major AM/FM station in California. We've been approved. So if you want to sponsor us into that, so incredibly inexpensive that your ad would be heard by the range covers 5 million people in population where your ad would be broadcast, and all these other stations would be thrown in for free. So really affordable prices to sponsor OppermanReport.com. Get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You can get a copy of that book at emailrevealer.com, or you can get a copy of that book now. It's back up on Amazon.com. How to Become a Successful Private Investigator by Ed Opperman. And this book has been updated a little bit from the previous book that we had that was available to our wonderful listeners. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, and we're here today with Michael Best, the man who broke the FBI's FOIA request system, single-handedly destroyed the FBI. He's GlomarDisclosure.com and also the1archive.org. And what's your that onearchive.org. And what is your Twitter again, my friend?
NatSecGeek, as in National Security Geek, NatSecGeek.
Great.
And you'll know that's me when you get a picture of a faceless man wearing glasses.
Okay, great. And now, what is your connection? What is your association with WikiLeaks?
That is always a little bit of a tough question to answer. I mean, the first thing to get out of the way is I'm not a representative of WikiLeaks. I do not speak for them. On occasion, I quote them for a statement or something that they make to me, but it's always, I make that clear that it's coming from them. And so I do not speak for the organization. I'm not a staff member or anything like that. We do communicate. I suppose one of the best descriptions would be I'm a volunteer. I help with various things when I can. I don't want to get into too many specifics because it's generally WikiLeaks' policy not to really comment on stuff like that. But my involvement is kind of known to an extent. So I mean, I'm willing to talk about that. they've promoted some of the files that I've uploaded, like the copy of the expanded Hillary Clinton file that they tweeted out. That was what I uploaded. The 13 or 14,000 page FBI file on Cuba and anti-Castro activities, they tweeted out a link to. That was one of my uploads, as well as the CIA files on Raoul Wallenberg. People began associating me with WikiLeaks after the AKP Turkey hack. Which, are you familiar with that at all? I'm not sure.
No, I don't think I am. No.
Okay, so that was the leak of the Turkey emails a couple of months ago, and so it was a bit of a complicated series of events. But what happened was a hacker broke into the ruling party of Turkey, their network, and he downloaded a whole bunch of stuff, over 100 gigabytes of their files. And while he was partway through, he distributed copies of the emails that he had gotten so far to a couple of people that he trusted. One of them misunderstood what was going on, apparently, and gave those files to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks then published the emails and made them searchable, the first part of the release that they had. And at that point, the hacker, who's known as Phineas Fisher, he's also the person responsible for like the hacking team breach, which I'm sure you and some of your listeners are familiar with from a couple months ago. He decided to release everything. His original plan had been to withhold a lot of it and communicate with activists and people on the ground and in the area, figure out what would be the most effective way of using that information in terms of publication and helping people who were facing political oppression and all sorts of those problems. But when WikiLeaks was passed the files by an associate that the two of them shared, who misunderstood the situation, WikiLeaks published the emails. So he decided to go ahead and publish everything to make sure that full context was there. And because, as far as he could tell, the cat was basically out of the bag. And, so he may as well do that. So those files were released to another hacker named Thomas White, better known as the Cthulhu, or on Twitter, CthulhuSec, short for Cthulhu Security. And I got the files from him. He was publishing them. They were already available online at this point. They were difficult for a lot of people to find, and you could only get it through a torrent. And again, it was 100 gigabytes. So I took the files from him, and since they were already released in public, I uploaded a copy of them to the Internet Archive, archive.org. It's my general policy that even if I don't really agree with any specific breach, once it's out there, unless it really contains a lot of personal details or information like credit card numbers and whatnot, I'm generally going to archive it and make it more available to people, because the people that are already going to do harm with it, they're already finding it.
Right.
It's everyone else that's going to have trouble getting at it and the valid information. So I created an archive there on, of these files. WikiLeaks then tweeted out a link to those files saying something like, here's a complete copy of our AKP email release and more. And so people decided that WikiLeaks was the one who released those files. And this was very infuriating, because that's how it was reported in the Huffington Post by a woman who I've become convinced has a grudge against WikiLeaks because she distorted fact and overlooked things. She wrote an article in the Huffington Post saying that WikiLeaks had published files that included the voter registration information for women in Turkey, and that had their personal information and put them in danger, and it was all WikiLeaks' fault. And that was problematic because, one, I had tweeted out the link first, which she could have easily seen if she had searched Twitter. And two, when you went to the page, when you clicked on the link, it had my name. It said Michael Best. It was in a collection specially created for me. If you looked at the metadata, it had my email address. It was not hard to figure out who actually uploaded it, but she wrote this long thing accusing WikiLeaks and blah, blah, blah. She never contacted me. She never really tried to get the files taken down or anything. But when it became known that the information was in there, the files were removed from the Internet Archive. I got an email from the office manager saying, they'd heard word, and so they did that as a temporary action. And he said, email me or call me. Here's my number. If we can talk about this. And that was a very reasonable reaction of them. They were basically saying, like, yeah, we're going to play it safe for right now, but it was a temporary reversible thing. They just made the files inaccessible, and they said, feel free to tell us why, it shouldn't be this way. And I sent back an email saying, like, no, you guys are right. And it turned into this long thing where I eventually had to write a separate article saying, WikiLeaks didn't upload those, I did. And, that was the version that got tweeted out because of the 140 character limit. And so that's very frustrating because a lot of people think that, one, I was the person who decided to release it when that's not the case. And two, that it turned into this whole thing that was very manipulative and felt like it did. I have to admit, WikiLeaks said from the beginning, like, no, this is an attack on us, blah, blah, blah. And I was skeptical. I thought, no, it's a good faith mistake on her part, the journalist who had written the Huffington Post piece. And as time went on, it became really clear that, no, they were right. She seems to have a bias. I don't think it's a necessarily malicious bias, but it's there, and she distorted facts. She said that she and others had repeatedly tried to reach out about the files and have them taken down. Well, that's not true. I was never contacted. She sent me messages over Twitter after I contacted her and said, you can quote me on this. And so I did, and then she went insane, figuratively speaking, basically saying, how dare you quote me? That was a private conversation. So I sent back a screenshot where it was 2 messages in a row from her. You can say this and add this to your article. Bam, quote. And, and things like that where she ignored my name being on the file. She ignored my email address in there. She didn't, and she lied purposefully about where the files were, how it was uploaded. She lied about contacting me to try and get stuff taken down. I had to contact her.
All right, let's not get too far into that. Let me ask you, what can you tell us? Because there's a lot of news going on in the past 48 hours with WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
What can you tell us? First, describe what's going on in case this plays a couple of days in the future. Describe what the situation is right now, and then tell us what you know.
All right. Well, there's a couple of situations. So I guess the biggest thing that's going on at the moment is the Podesta emails. That's the background. All these leaks that essentially target the Democrats and Hillary's campaign and people associated with it. There have also been very recently a lot of accusations about WikiLeaks being Russian-controlled, and especially the emails having been hacked by Russia. Then a lot of people panicked when Assange's internet was cut by Ecuador, and he basically, the account went silent for a while, and the WikiLeaks account tweeted out some pre-commitment hashes. They were labeled pre-commitment, but people saw this and kind of the internet went insane.
Right.
Some people started making up stories about how the Ecuadorian embassy where Assange is, Mendex, that it was being invaded by the Brits, Pamela Anderson, who had brought him a vegan sandwich earlier, had poisoned him and killed him. Mendax was dead. All these things. Some people were saying that, these pre-commitment hashes, those are passwords to unlock insurance files. And there's a lot of speculation going on from people that not only didn't know what was going on with WikiLeaks, but just didn't know what they're talking about, like with the pre-commitment hashes. And on the one hand, it's perfectly understandable for most people to have no idea what they are. What's not okay is for people who don't know what they are, even though it says pre-commitment, to then start speculating and making things up.
Okay, well, explain then what is that? What is the pre-commitment hashes?
A pre-commitment hash, it's a cryptographic hash. It's basically an encryption protocol that's one way. You encrypt it, you run it through the hash sequence, and it's impossible to decrypt. The only thing you can do is run that same text or item through the hash again, and it will produce the same result. Most of the time, what this technology is used for is if you're downloading something, they'll give you a hash checksum of the file. A lot of people will have seen MD5 checksum or something like that, CHECKSUM. And it's basically a way of verifying that, yes, this file is the same one that it was downloaded. There was no one substituted anything. There were no download errors. But you can also use it with text. And so what a lot of people will do if they know something ahead of time, and they need to be able to prove that either they were involved or that something was the case, and they need to make that proof public and verifiable, but not actually say it yet, they'll tweet out these pre-commitment hashes.
Gotcha.
And I mean, sometimes victims will do this. They'll tweet out a pre-commitment hash saying, so-and-so did this to me. But no one knows it says that because the investigation of the trial is ongoing, but it gives them, later proof that they can say, I didn't make this up in 2015. I said this back in 2010. It just wasn't public, but I can prove it. So the WikiLeaks account tweeted out 3 of these pre-commitment hashes in 3 different tweets. One labeled Ecuador, one labeled John Kerry, I believe, and the other being a reference to the Foreign Affairs Office for the UK.
Right.
And so a lot of people were saying, oh, he's dead, or they're releasing all these things, and there's tons of theories were going around. And, in reality, it was just the internet had been cut for Assange at the embassy. It had been cut by the Ecuadorians, apparently at the request of John Kerry. And all of this started apparently back in late September. And allegedly it relates to the peace negotiations with FARC, between Colombia and FARC, the resistance guerrilla terrorist group. But the actual severing of the internet connection, I believe, happened a few days ago, shortly after WikiLeaks released the section of the Podesta emails that included the Goldman Sachs speeches, the transcripts that Hillary had given. And so there's a lot of speculation that severing the connection was in retaliation for that. At this point, that's still speculation. A correlation between those two things happened close to each other. That's not necessarily anything.
Well, how about this? Biden also said that we were going to retaliate against the Russians, quote unquote, and we're going to, with some kind of internet retaliation. Do you think this is what he was talking about? No. A lot of the stuff that's been leaked about CIA cyber operations and stuff against Russia, it's hard to say how much of that is realistic. But what they were talking about were clearly cyber operations. This was a diplomatic action. This was the Ecuadorians shut off internet access themselves for their facility for someone who's staying there. Now, how do you know that the Ecuadorians did this? How do you know?
That's what WikiLeaks has said.
Okay.
So this came on the heels of renewed allegations about WikiLeaks being controlled by Russia and the Podesta emails and everything else having been hacked by Russia. And that's really a couple of issues that are separate, but everyone is treating as though they're the same. And this was further confused by what is honestly, it is a little bit confusing, but it's also truly ridiculous. One of the batches of the Podesta emails, I think, I don't remember the number. It was a couple of days ago. Russia Today, RT.com, posted an article about them, referencing the release and quoting the emails before WikiLeaks tweeted out the announcement about them.
Okay.
And Russia Today it's state-controlled media. I don't want to say it's always inaccurate, but it is Russian-controlled propaganda, basically. It's the equivalent of, reading The Voice of America. Like, you're not things aren't necessarily made up, but you are definitely getting a news with a view.
Well, you know what? In some ways, because I know some of the people that they have on there, and these are people with no credibility whatsoever. They describe themselves as being NSA and ex-CIA, and they're not. And these are pretty much kind of like,
I definitely I have a lot of problems with various articles and pieces done by Russia Today, but I'm trying not to paint them in too broad of a stroke, because those are the things that naturally catch my eye. And so I have no idea how the sampling, the ratio actually works out compared to, say, Fox News or something.
Right.
But yeah, there definitely are a lot of issues with some of their reporting, and even one of their articles about me, I don't want to say it made things up, but it completely misrepresented them to the point that it was false. Like, they said that I was a former employee of the Internet Archive, and that is not true. I have never worked for the Internet Archive. I would love to. They're great people. They're like, hey, let's make information freely available to people. We'll be the biggest library on the Internet. Host anything. I would love to, but I've never worked for them. I am a low-level administrator with very limited permissions for the specially created collections that they made for me in the National Security Internet Archive. And, that's about it.
Well, yeah, let's not get too far.
I've contributed, a huge number of the documents that they have, but I'm not an employee. Russia Today said I was. I tried to contact them and correct it.
Oh, that's hopeless. That's hopeless.
Kind of moved on.
Yeah, that's hopeless. You can't correct anything going on. But now let's not get too far off track. Back to what's going on this week with Assange.
They had released the article before WikiLeaks tweeted out the announcement saying the emails are available. And so a lot of people were pointing to this as proof that WikiLeaks was working with Russia, that Russia had the emails ahead of time, and all this stuff. And it is a question. And I have to say that I am eternally suspicious of Russia. The Russian intelligence. I love a lot of Russian culture. Some of my favorite books are translations of Russian novels. But I will never stop being suspicious of the Russian intelligence agencies and security agencies. The Chekist legacy is very ugly, and it basically hasn't stopped. But there is no proof that WikiLeaks is collaborating with them, and the fact that Russia Today published that when they did, a lot of people missed a couple of things, and so I made some notes about the exact timeline. Let me pull that up real quick.
Well, I tell you what, this might be a good time to take a commercial break. And while you're pulling that up, okay, so we're with Michael Best, GlomarDisclosure.com, and also too on Facebook. You can find him on Glomar Disclosure. His other website is that1archive.org. That1archive.org. And you can find him on Twitter at NatSecGeek. NatSecGeek. We'll be right back with more of Michael Best. He's telling us the inside scoop on what's going on over there at WikiLeaks with Assange. I'm on the wrong page. Let me get back to this. Okay, sure. Okay. And we'll be right back with more of Michael Best right after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. Did you know that 30% of all people on online dating websites and personal ads are either married or in a monogamous relationship? 30%. If you suspect that your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend may be cheating online, go to emailrevealer.com. And our online infidelity investigation. You give us their email address, and we can trace it back to online personal ads, dating sites, and social networks. We can even expand the investigation and find them cheating on escort service sites or even porn sites if they're registered to porn sites and swinger sites. So check out emailrevealer.com if you suspect your spouse is cheating, and check out our online infidelity investigation. William Ramsey is a producer here at the Opperman Report, and he's just come out with a new book, Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. Now, he just sent me a copy of this book. Oh, boy, it's about 2 inches thick, and there's a chapter on just about everybody in this book that you can imagine. The Beatles, and Jack Parsons, everybody's in here. It's incredible. And I definitely recommend this book. There's a bunch of pictures in here, too, of all these people and different chapters and information. Anselm LaVey and people I've never heard of, too. There's a whole bunch in here. JFC Fuller. I don't know who he is. But it's great stuff by our producer here, William Ramsey. So check out Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. You can find it on Amazon.com, or you could find it in the OppermanReport.com bookstore. We have an urgent bulletin. It seems that the group Strawman is still on the loose. It has been confirmed that Strawman are Canadian, okay, and that authorities are asking people to stay indoors, lock your doors and windows until this group can be dealt with. You could find more information about this group of Canadians, at strawmanmusic.com. You can have your ad played here. Okay, we're looking for sponsors. Okay, in fact, we desperately need sponsors right now to take this show to the next level. So you can have your your ad played here, read live, like I'm doing now, so artfully. Or we can even work up a little jingle for you with some music and stuff like that and play it here. You have no idea how inexpensive it would be to have your ad played on the Opperman Report on 7 stations live Friday night and another 7 stations live on Saturday night, plus replayed every day of the week on different stations, and then archived on YouTube, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and all different kinds of podcasts, Pod This and Podbean, all different kinds of places who archive the show for us. And on those archives, your ad would play indefinitely, forever. You also get a little banner on OppermanReport.com. You get a mention on the air, you get a little interview on the air, and all kinds of fun stuff if you sponsor Opperman Report. We have an opportunity to get this show on a major AM/FM station in California. We've been approved. So if you want to sponsor us into that, so incredibly inexpensive that your ad would be heard by the range covers 5 million people in population where your ad would be broadcast, and all these other stations would be thrown in for free. So really affordable prices to sponsor OppermanReport.com. get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You can get a copy of that book at emailrevealer.com, or you can get a copy of that book. Now it's back up on Amazon.com. How to Become a Successful Private Investigator by Ed Opperman. And this book has been updated a little bit from the previous book that we had that was available to our wonderful listeners. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Michael Best. He runs GlomarDisclosure.com and also ThatOneArchive.org. And you can find him also, too, on Twitter at NatSecGeek. Now, Michael, let me see if I can summarize, if I understand what you're saying so far. Mm-hmm. Is that the Ecuadorian government shut off Assange's email internet connection.
Right.
He had some pre-commitment hashtags that he tweeted out. And this was basically, he wanted to set a record of stuff he knew that was going on.
Yeah, the hashtag, the hashes, they're not hashtags. The cryptographic hashes were pre-commitments about some knowledge or activity. And that appears to have been part of the contingency plan that was activated when Assange's internet was cut off, when Mendex's internet was cut off. And a lot of people saw those and got confused about what they meant. And the short answer about that is no one really knows what they mean yet. They relate to Ecuador, John Kerry, and the UK government. They're very likely a response to the internet connection being severed and what's going on with Assange.
But these are not these are not the insurance files. Everybody's saying, oh, these are the insurance files. That Assange is dead. He's been arrested. He's pulled out with a black bag over his head. All that stuff you can confirm is total nonsense, right?
Yeah, that's all nonsense. None of that is true. He's alive and well. He's still stuck in the embassy, and his communication channels are obviously being interfered with, but he's as of this point he's alive and well. He's okay.
When you say
it's not clear what the Ecuadorian government is going to do next. I mean, the Ecuadorian government has the ability and authority to, and at any time, tell the UK police, hey, you can come on in and arrest him now.
Right.
It's not that the UK police can't do that, or the Ecuadorians can't force Assange to leave and be arrested. So, at this point, early Tuesday afternoon, 3:30 Eastern time, Assange is still in the embassy and he's fine, but he's got the extra isolation going on, and it's not clear what's going to happen next.
But he is somehow able to communicate out.
Somewhat in a very limited fashion. They, at least a brief message was passed. It's not really clear the extent that he's able to get stuff passed out, if he still has a working phone or what's going on there.
Now, what about physical visitors? If Pam Anderson was able to go in there with a sandwich just the other day, right in the midst of all this, like she wasn't stopped from going in there. I'm sure other people are going in there. What do we know about that?
Not a whole lot at this point. Even a lot of the stuff around Pam Anderson was speculation or just pointless, and it's not really clear exactly what's going on in the embassy. It's very opaque, and they have total control over who comes in and out.
Hey, what do we know about this Pam Anderson trip to begin with? What's the reason why? Was she in Ecuador for other business and just happened, or are they longtime friends? Do they have an association?
No, he's in London. It's the Ecuadorian
right.
embassy in London.
Right. I apologize. Yeah.
And no, I'm not really sure what's going on there. She may have just been visiting. She
passing by.
The Pam Anderson trip. To be honest, I don't even know for a fact that the Pam Anderson trip happened.
Yeah, that's true. That's
recorded, and it's one of those things that it was like, well, I don't need to fact check it because, what bloody difference does it make? So, and besides, it's Pam Anderson. Like who the bleep cares? It was kind of my reaction. I was like, oh, good. Someone who, anytime she showed up in a TV show I liked, I knew it was going to have a lot of pointless sexual humor and not be very funny.
Now, clarify for me again, Colombia and FARC, the rebels, the FARC rebels. How does that fit into all this again?
Apparently, the request to Ecuador was connected to the peace talks between Colombia and FARC, which is somewhat plausible because it has a lot of repercussions for the region. It's a violent group at times that has been involved in the drug trade. I believe that they've mostly allegedly gotten out of that. But the peace talks are falling apart, kind of as a lot of people knew they would. This isn't the first time they've gone to the peace table, and the public apparently rejected the peace deal, which is honestly, that could easily make things a lot worse there. But the information from WikiLeaks is that several U.S. sources have said that it was connected to the FARC negotiations in some way, and that they either thought it was going to disrupt that or threaten it, or the details behind that are not clear.
Okay, is there anything else you can share with us as far as WikiLeaks goes?
Well, before the commercial break, we were getting into the thing with Russia Today, where they released some of the emails and a story about it before WikiLeaks tweeted the announcement. And that was something that a lot of people misunderstood on both sides. And the issue is there, but it's not exactly what everyone thinks it is. Let me just go through the basic timeline, and all the times that I'm citing are local time for me, Eastern Standard Time on the U.S. And this was on October 14th, so it was 4 days ago from when we're recording this, but it was October 14th that I was talking about this stuff. At 8:47 local time, I first announced that the Podesta email 6 were going up. And at 8:54 local time, I sent out a link to the copy of those emails that I had uploaded. I had taken the raw email files for Podesta email 6, I put them into a zip file and uploaded them onto the Internet Archive. That was at 8:54. At 9:08, Russia Today's article went live, and they tweeted out a link about it at 9:09. A few hours later, and again the next day, they edited their article. In their article, they referenced and quoted the WikiLeaks emails, but several people have assumed that Russia Today used the copy that I uploaded, and that's not true. They did not use the copy that I uploaded. WikiLeaks sent out their tweet at 9:38 local time, so it was at 8:47 that I announced it, 8:54 local that I uploaded a copy. Russia Today sent out their article at 9:08, and at 9:38, WikiLeaks sent out the tweet announcing it. So there's a couple of issues there. A lot of people freaked out because Russia Today was publishing it before the official announcement. Russia Today tried to say the next day, that they just scooped the internet. And I'd say, well, that's not true. First of all, I announced it before that and uploaded the copies of it. And some people assumed, like I said, that they used the copies that I uploaded, which is not true. The timing of WikiLeaks' announcement at 9:38 is determined by two things, essentially. One is the speed of indexing, which is how quickly all the email files get added to the index and they show up in the searches, and that can be a bit computer intensive even with a server cluster. So there's a delay between when the files are uploaded. Hang on a second. There's a delay between when the files are uploaded and when they're indexed, and you can find them through the search interface. That's the first bottleneck for when WikiLeaks announces this stuff. The second is what's called the stochastic terminator, which is just an algorithm which determines when to publish things based on trends, current activity of the day, how to best time it for impact. So the issue basically becomes, because again, Russia Today did not use the copy that I uploaded, but the issue becomes, okay, so the indexing wasn't necessarily done until 9:38, half an hour after Russia Today sent out the article, and the upload began at 8:45 to 8:47, somewhere in there. But the articles weren't, or the emails weren't all indexed and searchable right away. Some were, some weren't, and the question basically becomes, and no one has actually addressed this or tried to work out the math or anything. The question basically becomes, how long would it have taken Russia Today? Let's assume that they had 5 staff members on standby, and as soon as they found the emails, they started searching. Assuming that the emails that they cited were all indexed by the time the article went live, the issue becomes, how long would it have taken them to find those emails? Because they would have to search through multiple terms and then go through false hits for those emails, read those emails, and they cited about 5 or 6 of them. So, what no one has actually done is tried to figure out how long it would have taken them to go through and find the emails that they cited and discard the other ones that they would have found. Because everyone basically just wants to either promote themselves for scooping the internet,
right,
like Russia Today is falsely claiming, or to use it as, quote, hard proof that Russia and WikiLeaks are collaborating. And there's a couple of points there that I want to address about the WikiLeaks Russia collaboration accusations. But I guess before we move on to that, are there any questions about the Russia Today thing or the timeline there? Is there anything that kind of wasn't clear? Or
no, I think we're clear. I think we're clear.
Okay. Well, interesting. WikiLeaks just sent out some. I'll have to read that when we get off here. There's a new little release from WikiLeaks about some new accusations that were coming out. They got some documents about it. But moving on to the alleged Russian connection, everyone is treating that as though it's one issue when it's actually a couple of different issues. And the first part is whether or not Russia actually hacked the emails. The Guccifer 2 has taken credit for hacking the emails and sending them to WikiLeaks. He announced this before WikiLeaks started publishing them. He's published other documents from the hack. It's accepted that Guccifer 2 is the source of this, whether he's an individual or a group or just a cover identity. And there's a lot of evidence that Guccifer 2 is a Russian front. And I'm referring to him as a he because the entity Guccifer 2 claims to be a male, I believe, a single male. He claims to be Romanian, like the original Guccifer, but has a very poor grasp of Romanian, refuses to speak in it, and uses improper Romanian. The first batch of documents that he went out, they all had Russian metadata attached. A couple of linguistic analysis have concluded that he's most likely a native Russian speaker. He uses Russian typographic styles. For instance, when we do a smiley emoticon, it's generally colon dash and then the parentheses. And because of the way the Cyrillic keyboards are set up, they generally do it as just 3 parentheses without the colon or the dash. And that was what Lucifer 2 did. And there's also technical analysis that links Lucifer 2, the hack, to several known Russian fronts, hacking organizations that are state-controlled, Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear. So a lot of people assume that it was Russia, and there's a lot of evidence that it may have been. It seems fairly persuasive, but it's not definitive. Although the U.S. government has made the official accusation, and when I say it's not definitive, I'm referring there to the evidence that's been made public, and some of that does include technical evidence, but there's a lot more evidence that they have that hasn't been given to the public yet, and hasn't been verified by 5 or 6 cybersecurity tech firms.
Yeah, if you listen to the Clinton campaign, though, they've got it all solved. They got it.
Yeah, well, and I mean, like I said, I'm eternally suspicious of Russia and the Russian intelligence agencies. It's very easy for me to believe that it was Russia that did the hack. And so a lot of people are jumping to the conclusion that this means that Russia and WikiLeaks are completely in cahoots, and it's totally wrong for WikiLeaks to publish documents that seem to have been hacked by a state-sponsored hacker. And that argument is one of the things that just infuriates me, because it's incredibly hypocritical. What a lot of people choose to forget, the people making those arguments, they're choosing to forget that WikiLeaks has published documents that were hacked by American state-controlled hackers. The Syria emails were obtained by Sabu and his friends, and WikiLeaks got them and published them. So, a lot of people cheered for that, and understandably, because it showed corruption. But now those same people are saying that, well, the fact that WikiLeaks is publishing stuff that seems to have come from Russia means that they're in cahoots with Russia. And they say, well, no, they're not. And if they are, that's certainly not proof, because WikiLeaks published stuff from American hackers and has repeatedly publicly said, and I've heard this echoed in my communications with them, that if it's a secret or censored or classified document and they can confirm that it's real, for the most part, they're going to publish it. They don't care who it comes from. If the CIA director himself decided, hey, I'm going to give you guys, 1 million pages of CIA documents, and WikiLeaks verified that they weren't, altered or forgeries, WikiLeaks would publish them.
Well, let me ask you a question. I don't want to get too far off track, but just really quick. DC leaks. What can you tell us about this new DC leaks? Because Soros isn't confirming that he was hacked, is he?
I really can't tell you anything about DC leaks. A lot of people have connected DC leaks to the same Russian hacker or hackers that allegedly hacked Podesta and the campaigns. But that's not something that I particularly know about. I'm not in touch with the people operating DC leaks, so I can't really comment on that at all.
Okay.
But going back to the Russian thing, there's still, beyond the fact that they were hacked by Russia, people are saying that, okay, well, Assange and Mendax and WikiLeaks, they're all they're controlled by Russian intelligence, and that there's no public evidence for that, and it's one of those things that I have looked for, because, like I said, I'm eternally suspicious of Russia and the Russian intelligence agencies. But there's a couple of things that people are overlooking with those theories, and they're fairly major. First of all, it is entirely possible that Russia today and Russian intelligence know what WikiLeaks is going to publish and when, because they hacked WikiLeaks. And I got to be clear, this is speculation, but anyone who's saying that Russia probably hacked the DNC and the Clinton Foundation and all this other stuff, and they're hacking U.S. systems, we then have to admit the possibility that they also hacked WikiLeaks in some fashion or another. Or even that they managed to get an asset inside, as the U.S. did a couple of times. The U.S. managed to embed, or rather turn, two people that were associated with WikiLeaks and basically make them, I don't want to say moles, but I guess double agents would be the best term. So that's a possibility that a lot of people are simply ignoring. And there's exactly as much evidence for that theory and possibility that's been made public as there is for the theory that WikiLeaks is Russian controlled, which is to say none. It's a possibility, but there is no evidence for it. I'm always suspicious of that, and I'm not above suspicion that WikiLeaks is being manipulated by Russia when Russia provides these documents and these files. But WikiLeaks' job is to publish things that are verified. It doesn't matter who the source is. And so the other side of the allegations that people are throwing in there is that WikiLeaks is collaborating with the Trump campaign and the Republicans, and particularly with Roger Stone.
Yeah.
And the basis of that is largely that Roger Stone has said that he has been in contact with WikiLeaks. He's since backtracked on that. We'll get to that in a second. And he predicted several of the breaches weeks before they were made public knowledge, like the Clinton Foundation and the Podesta emails. So, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, he is in touch with WikiLeaks then, and say, well, no. First of all, there's no evidence for that. WikiLeaks firmly denies it, and I have no reason to doubt it. And when pressed, Stone has given a couple of versions basically saying that he has a back channel connection. He has a mutual friend with Mendax, with Assange, and that's been his source of information, but that he hasn't been in direct contact with WikiLeaks. And the possibility that I think everyone is overlooking, and this is much more likely, honestly, that he does have inside information, Roger Stone, but it's from the entity, group, or individual known as Guccifer 2. And I believe that very strongly lines up with the evidence that's out there, because Roger Stone has been very inaccurate about his predictions over what WikiLeaks was going to do. He made up that stuff about the October surprise was dropping on the 4th. What WikiLeaks was doing, what they clearly announced, was the 10th anniversary press conference. And he's stated other things about, okay, well, when this is going to be published or what's going to happen as a result. And that stuff he's generally been wrong about. What he has been right about are things that the source of those materials would know about. That the fact that the breach occurred, the fact that those materials had found their way to WikiLeaks and that they were going to be published. And the fact that he or his source misguessed when they were going to be released is also consistent with him being provided the information, or possibly even a complete copy of the documents, by Guccifer 2. Because that the group or individual known as Guccifer 2 has expressed dissatisfaction a couple of times with WikiLeaks' publishing speed, especially early on. He wound up posting additional documents to his website and sending out documents to people like Joe Ucho at The Hill. And, because he was apparently impatient with WikiLeaks' publishing schedule.
Let me ask you a question about the timing. Do you think that WikiLeaks is trying to influence the U.S. election with the timing of their release?
WikiLeaks is trying to get the information out before the election happens, and to an extent, I mean that's if they're going to release the information, then it should be before the election. There's kind of this horror scenario that we've had, and we kind of, although we didn't really prove it 100% with Reagan at the time, where we basically elect someone and then very quickly after we begin finding out these things that it's like, oh, I didn't realize that's who I was voting for. I didn't realize that's what they really said. That's what they really thought. And so to an extent, it is much better to get it out before the election. In terms of trying to influence the election, they're trying to influence it with accurate information. And the accusations that they're only publishing stuff against the Democrats, well, I mean, first of all, that's not true. They're publishing pretty much all of the 60,000 emails, the Podesta emails. And, that includes the ones that make people look good or them doing what they should do with their job. And what a lot of people forget is that, and this is why I don't consider WikiLeaks a news organization in the traditional sense of the term. Because unlike normal news organizations like the New York Times or even yourself, WikiLeaks can't go after a story. That's not what they do. The New York Times or you can make phone calls, you can talk to people, you can piece together a story, you can investigate and then report on that. WikiLeaks is not investigative journalism. They enable investigative journalism by publishing all these documents, but they have no control over what documents they're sent.
Oh, okay, but wait, but the timing of the documents they could have released a lot of this stuff during the primary, and it would have had a huge effect. Did they have it at this time? Do you know?
Well, that's not entirely clear. What was in the initial insurance package, the 88 gigabyte insurance package that went out, I think in August, there's only about 3 to 5% of that has positively been released. Beyond that, it's not clear if WikiLeaks was sent subsequent information after the insurance file went out. The metadata for the Podesta emails has been cleansed, and it shows a date in September after the insurance file went out, which could indicate that the Podesta emails came to them afterwards, or simply that was when they cleansed all the metadata and did everything they do to protect sources. In terms of getting stuff out there and the publishing speeds, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I completely understand that frustration. Everyone wants the information, everyone wants it quickly, and there's a couple of reasons why it's not really being done that way this time. And the first is, they're experimenting with the stochastic terminator, the algorithm which determines publishing for maximum impact. The second is that if you dump 50,000 emails all at once, a lot of stories are simply going to get overlooked because, there's only so much time that CNN can spend talking about things. There's only so many column inches, so to speak, that they can devote on any given day to that stuff. So by spacing it out, people get overloaded less, the story gets fully explored. But beyond that, it's much more of a resource issue. So I started to say research. It's much more of a research issue than some people might think. Like I mentioned briefly before, the indexing time for the emails, it's there. It's, you know, and it's a considerable use of computer resources. It takes time. There's the uploading of stuff, and it's one of those things where WikiLeaks in many ways has less resources than it once did, both because of there are fewer people donating. Mendax is stuck in the embassy in London, the Ecuadorian embassy, and you've got a lot of people who are no longer participating and helping. A few years ago, we had, you know, people setting up projects with WikiLeaks and separate from WikiLeaks, sorting through stuff, finding the significant things, basically making it into a real project that you had a lot of people participating in. And so they were able to handle larger numbers. And that's not really the case anymore. You see a little bit of that on Reddit, but it's not very well coordinated. It's usually very partisan. And it's honestly pretty incomplete. The other thing is that WikiLeaks doesn't have a long history of publishing things all at once. That's something that a lot of people misunderstand. Generally, when things get published all at once, like the Sony emails when WikiLeaks added them, or the hacking team emails, it's because they're already out there, and WikiLeaks is simply making them indexed and searchable and easier for people to use. Whenever it's new information, the tendency has been to release it over time. If you look back at Cablegate, when Chelsea Manning, then Bradley Manning, got the cables and gave them to WikiLeaks and they were being published, they were partnering with news agencies like The Guardian, and they were releasing, you know, a certain number every day, and they would discuss them, and that basically came to a crashing end when it's a long story as to how, but WikiLeaks had published online an insurance file with all of the Cablegate cables, and they had given the password to The Guardian. And, you know, that was so The Guardian could look at all of them and kind of get a head start on the research. And what wound up happening was they wrote a book and they included the password in the book. So the book gets published, people find the password, the insurance file is public, people decrypt it, and all of a sudden, all of those emails basically come out. And previously, WikiLeaks had not only been releasing them a little bit more slowly, but they had also been redacted in some instances. And then when the complete unredacted version goes out, that kind of blew up their operation there. And that's where a lot of people get the impression that, oh, WikiLeaks releases this stuff all at once. And that's historically not the case. And, you know, you're also seeing a lot less partnering with media organizations for the larger leaks and the long leads, because The Guardian did that, and that really left a bad taste in WikiLeaks' mouth. And, you know, it's a danger to sources. It's not something they're going to do again, especially not while Mendax is being held, basically.
And how many media organizations can they really trust? You know, if you look now, it seems like everybody's in the Clintons' pocket. You know, what goes on? You know, it's just unbelievable what's going on this election cycle. So. Yeah,
well, and I mean, it's this one thing that's been very interesting to watch with this election cycle and these set of leaks is it's highlighted how a lot of people that acted like they supported WikiLeaks didn't really support WikiLeaks. There were a lot of people who were basically liberals and Democrats, and they loved WikiLeaks 8 years ago because exposing Iraq and Afghanistan and against George W. Bush, and it agreed with their politics. And I say there because I'm not invested in either party. I care about policy. I don't care about politics. But a lot of people were very happy because it agreed with their existing beliefs. And people that supported Bush and the Iraq war and Afghanistan, a lot of them, were very much against WikiLeaks because WikiLeaks was publishing stuff about that and exposing things and creating the possibility for this and that. And now we get an instance where information is being published that's critical of a Democratic administration and a Democratic campaign and all these Democrats and liberals. And very, very suddenly, and I'm not painting everyone in here. I know that there's a lot of exceptions, but there's a very strong shift, and suddenly all these Republicans and Trump supporters love WikiLeaks. And all these liberals and progressives that have been behind WikiLeaks for years, suddenly, no, they hate WikiLeaks because it doesn't agree with their specific politics. And that's, in a way, that's been very enlightening to see that happen. And, you see a lot of other people who, and there's a lot I don't agree with Glenn Greenwald on, but he's at least reasoned and measured in his criticism of WikiLeaks. He's saying, I don't like this, I like this. He's not painting them with a wide brush or trying to reduce them to a single moment in time, which I think is another mistake that a lot of people make with trying to understand WikiLeaks. We look at them in terms of, well, what did they do this week? It's like, well, that's a pretty terrible way of understanding any company or person. Not to defend deforestation or something, but just as a quick and dirty metaphor, if all you do is look at someone for a 2-week period, you look at a company and you'll see them cutting down all these trees for no reason, and then they leave. And, because you only look at it for 2 weeks and you don't see that they then develop in that space, which, again, I'm not a fan of deforestation, but it at least makes it not pointless. And especially with an organization like WikiLeaks that is very necessarily opaque in terms of who's involved and what they're doing and what they have and what's in the pipeline, it's very easy for people to misunderstand what's going on. Because you've got this transparency organization that, because of circumstances, is forced to be very untransparent in its activities at times.
We're almost running out of time, and I know I wanted to cover at least a little bit with you about your project to obtain new documents regarding Frank Sturgis. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it turns out that Frank Sturgis, who probably a lot of your listeners will know the name from Watergate, if not the Kennedy assassinations around him. His previously released file, FBI file, was, I think, a couple hundred pages long, not very significant. A bit more was given to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, and according to the Assassination Record Review Board, the ARB, if I recall, there were only about 1,000 or 2,000 pages of his file which were deemed even vaguely relevant to the Kennedy assassination. So in one of my requests with pestering the FBI, I requested a copy of his file. And for once, they decided to admit, even though other people have requested the file and they said, oh, there's only, so many pages, they admitted to me that his file is a little over 75,000 pages long.
Wow.
Which, I mean, that's tremendous. That's if you combine the files on the Warren Commission, the Kennedy assassination, and Lee Harvey Oswald, the FBI files for all three, Frank Sturgis's file is still larger. If you add in the FBI file for Watergate as well, Frank Sturgis's file is still larger than all of them combined. So, and this was pretty interesting to me because he's a figure in a lot of lore and a lot of theories floating around about him. There's a crowdfund going on to try and cover the cost of his file. The FBI wants about a couple of $1,000s in duplication costs. The crowdfund may have ended by the time this airs, but you can still send the money to muckrock.com, muckrock.com. I use them to file most of my requests, and they publish all the documents that people file Freedom of Information Act requests through them for. But anyway, so I decided to do a little bit of extra research into him before I launched the crowdfund because 75,000 pages, that was a lot. Was it worth it? Are we just going to get a whole lot of nonsense? And I found a couple of really interesting things. First off, he has claimed and denied at various times having worked for the CIA. The CIA has denied that he ever worked for them. I found a couple of documents where the agency confirms that he worked for them. And one was a description it was a memo written by Schlesinger, the former director of Central Intelligence, was talking about a conversation with then CIA Director Colby, who told him that Sturgis had not been on the payroll for a number of years. But he confirmed that Sturgis had been paid by them. I found a second CIA memo that describes them. They confirm this. They say, it's the case. We know that the agency has, previously denied any connection to him at all. So I did a little bit more digging, and I found a draft. It doesn't seem to have actually been sent out, but I found a draft CIA document where they acknowledge that Sturgis was an agency contact back in the 1960s. So he, despite all the denials from CIA, he was employed by the agency at one time or another, very likely for the Bay of Pigs, where his handler was Joaquin San Genis, also known as Sam Genis. But beyond that, he had a whole lot of other eerie connections that haven't really been explored very well. He was involved in the break-in for the Chilean embassy, and when the FBI recruited an informant who was telling them about that stuff, he was assassinated. He was palling around in Florida with other assassins. One of the two people who was involved in the plot to kill the Panamanian president back in the 50s, two of them were Cuban agents that actually worked for the CIA. I found the documentation to prove this. One of them confessed to the assassination and then recanted and managed to get freed. And later he's palling around with Sturgis in Miami. The other person was also a CIA asset who in the 70s was involved and connected to threats against the vice president and the CIA director Helms, and I think probably Kissinger, if I recall correctly.
And let me ask you, have you ever talked to Frank Sturgis? Have you ever talked to his nephew, Jim Hunt?
No, not yet, but I have made contact with an individual who, he's out in California. His partner basically inherited all of Sturgis's documents and effects when Sturgis died.
Well, Jim Hunt's
so the
probably...
two of them have these boxes and boxes of things from, his personal notes and letters, as well as government documents and stuff relating to Marita Lawrence and stuff. And so we're hoping we have a tentative agreement to figure out a way I'm going to go out there with my scanner at some point and help them digitize everything and get it text searchable, because right now it's just a couple boxes of documents that are very unwieldy.
Oh, yeah, boy, that'd be great. That's a gold mine. But Jim Hunt's probably listening to the show right now, and he told me all kinds of stuff, that Sturgis had his own B-25 bomber, and that he did his own bombing run over Haiti. He dropped bombs on Duvalier's palace. All kinds of stuff, and all that stuff in Portugal. That they just went down and testified before the Portuguese Parliament about their involvement in that assassination. Have you ever run across A.J. Weberman in any of your work?
I've never spoken or communicated with him, but I'm familiar with his stuff, and especially the three tramps theory, which personally I discount the tramps theory. I don't buy into it. I accept the explanation of whoever they really were. They found the records at some point, apparently. And part of that, I have to add a disclaimer here. Part of that is because I don't see any resemblance in the faces, and I am mildly face blind. So I have a lot of trouble recognizing faces if I'm not very familiar with someone, especially if it's a photograph, especially if it's an old photograph or a black and white photograph. So, my thinking that they do not look like, Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis and Gary Hemming or whoever else the third one was supposed to be at different points. My not seeing that resemblance, everyone should put a little asterisk next to that and check for themselves. I think A.J. Weberman got a lot of initial documents out there. I don't agree with some of his conclusions. The focus that he had on the Cuban connection and Gary Patrick Hemming, I think that the Cuban connection to the JFK thing is so weird and intricate and multi-layered, and you were bringing up some of the weird stuff Sturgis has allegedly done, and I had never heard that about the B-52 bomber.
Yeah, it was exclusive. Yeah, it came out exclusive on my show.
Yeah, but and on the one hand, I'm like, no, that didn't happen. That's too ridiculous and insane. But a fair number of the documented things in Sturgis's file are a bit out there and insane. And I mean, he's. When the new CIA Watergate history came out a little while ago, and unfortunately people kind of really misunderstood what it said and what it meant for the most part. The reporting was really inaccurate. But you get into that stuff, and I mean, even the Cubans involved there, it was some weird, wild stuff, and you had a lot of private entities with pseudo-governmental coordination, oversight, approval, monitoring, whatever at various times. And you had so many people, because these were loose-knit refugee organizations and freedom fighters. You had a lot of people going from group to group, and people that would be like, okay, I'm Alpha 66, and I'm the anti-communist brigade, and this and that. And without real membership lists for a lot of them, because that's not how they worked. So much of that is just vague and still not well covered. Yeah,
and then you get into all like you mentioned, Marita Lorenz, and an assassination plot, and they're writing a book together, and she's paying for, who knows what went on with all that stuff in the confession. But now, to jump from that topic, because I did want to talk to you too about, because I had Ted Rubenstein on the show, and it was just when you had released that fascinating document with Bill Weld, who is the vice presidential candidate. This is mind-blowing stuff, man. And it was right toward the end.
Johnson.
Yeah, what do you tell us? Explain what you got there and what it is.
All right, so that letter it's one of those things where there's a lot of indications that it's authentic. The letter, pulling up a copy here, it's from, let me just summarize it real quick for the audience, because I'm sure a lot of them don't remember the Gunderson, the Rubenstein, wrong Ted, the Rubenstein conversation about it. It's a letter from William Weld in 1985 during the Reagan years. He was the U.S. attorney at the time. The letter says that Ghorbanifar, Khashoggi, and Richard Armitage will broker the transaction of Promise software to Sheikh Khalid bin Mahfouz for resale and general distribution as gifts in his region, contingent upon the three conditions we last spoke of. Promise must have a soft arrival, no paperwork, customs, or delay. It must be equipped with a special data retrieval unit. As before, you must walk the financial aspects through Credit Suisse into National Commercial Bank. If you encounter any problems, please contact me directly. And it's signed by Bradford Reynolds, who at the time was an assistant attorney general in the Civil Rights Division. So what that's referring to, Khashoggi and Ghorbanifar, both connected to Iran-Contra and all sorts of other weird things, arms trafficking and money laundering. Richard Armitage, U.S. official connected to a lot of that stuff. Bin Mahfouz was an al-Qaeda financier connected to BCCI Bank, and at one point there was a misunderstanding that he was the brother or brother-in-law or stepbrother of Osama bin Laden. And that's since been discredited / denied, and we're not sure where that comes from. But the Promise software that it's talking about is referring to Inslaw's Promise software, which the Department of Justice stole, and they, CIA, Wackenhut, and Israel at various times and working together at various levels, modified it, put in backdoors, and sent it to countries along with computer systems that had been modified and had chips added so they could access all of their network. They drove Inslaw into bankruptcy and all sorts of weird stuff that it connects to many other cases in varying degrees. But so this letter is...
Where'd you get the letter?
The letter was sent to Bill Hamilton, William Hamilton, who wrote the Promise software and created Inslaw Incorporated with his wife Nancy. He was sent a copy of the letter, I believe, in 2005 by a source which he is not familiar with the identity of the source. No. But the source had proven generally reliable about other things, knowledgeable about high-level stuff. And so it's this old, folded, torn-up photocopy that's most likely a copy of a copy. All copies of the document were apparently ordered destroyed. But this one wasn't, and it was sent to Bill Hamilton. And authenticating it or proving it's inauthentic has it's been very difficult. The short upfront answer is there's a lot of indications that it's authentic, but it's not 100% confirmed yet. And I'm not sure. Would your listeners be interested in some of the authentication process and the signs for validity and against it, or is that too technical and too much time?
Yeah, we're down to 2 minutes. Okay. What do you want to leave us with in the 2 minutes? Now we're gonna have you back too. You got to promise you're gonna come back.
All right, sure. But this letter, it's one of the more interesting and unconfirmed aspects of a case that involves so many things from NSA to CIA penetration, selling stuff to the Russians. The Israelis got a copy of the software, and one of the documents that I managed to get released for the first time, there was a cover-up with the Israeli spy chief came to the U.S. under someone else's name, and he retrieved the software. And they've tried to portray it as that person that he impersonated was the real person with the software who retrieved it, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, you know what? We're gonna have to get you back. We're gonna have to come back and just talk about the Promise, the whole Promise octopus thing.
Yeah,
all by itself.
Let me just finish this thought real quick. I got documents that proved that the Israeli was not in the country at the time. According to his passport, he had already left the U.S. and was back in Israel. So they're giving this software out to these phantom Israeli spies that all other records are then destroyed and deleted. And, but that bit of paperwork is confirmed 100%. And like you said, it's an octopus that, we could spend a couple hours on easily.
Yeah. Okay, Michael Best, GlomarDisclosure.com is one, and also thatonearchive.org. You can also check him out over at on Twitter, NatSecGeek, NatSecGeek. I'm sure everybody's going to be hooking up with you, man. Got a lot of information. Thank you so much.